Allan is sometimes a consultant, sometimes an agile coach. He's an author of multiple books, and through all this, he aims to make software development better and help people reconcile different views. I'm going to be posting a couple of links in the chat on behalf of Allan, and please give him a warm welcome. Allan, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Switch myself off mute. Okay. As you can see, I'm actually at a conference here. You can see my background. I'm actually on stage. I can imagine you all there behind me. So, Reawakening Agile with OKRs. I suspect a few of you are wondering what the hell I'm talking about, because OKRs have got a bit of a bad reputation in some circles. If you've not come across them before, it is objectives and key results. So actually the O, the K and the R, although increasingly I find it useful to think of them as outcomes and key results. What is the outcome we're after and the key results? As I was saying, OKRs have got themselves a bit of a bad rap in some circles, and I think like a lot of powerful tools and like a lot of the Agile toolkit, they can be used for good or for evil. A few years ago now, I was working for a large, shall we say, financial institution, because that's what it was. And I was coaching some teams, and suddenly we were told the management wanted to adopt OKRs. Well, of course, me and the other Agile coaches, we knew what OKRs were. They've been knocking around for years, but we didn't have bags of experience with them. So we embarked on this massive learning journey. And if I'm being honest, I started off as an OKR cynic. To me, they looked like the latest iteration of command and control, management from above, statistical micromanagement, all the rest of it. And I said, okay, well, I'm just going to see what happens. And I worked with them for over a year. And you know what? I came to like them. I came to find they were quite powerful. I came to find they were useful. And so when that gig came to an end, I started to write down my notes about OKRs. And then this little pandemic thing hit. And those few notes turned into a book. So there's a picture of it, Succeeding with OKRs in Agile. And yes, I have a book to sell here. I'm also going to give a couple of copies of the book away. Whoops. So I've set up a little form on my website. If you wander over there while I'm talking, pop in your name and email address. And after the talk, I'll download the names, and I'll spin a wheel and I'll randomly pick a couple of you. Nobody else is going to see your email addresses, just your name and your name and email address, and I'll ping you and let you know. First name out gets a posted copy, second person gets an ebook. But you've got all talk to do that. So anyway, I have a book, yes. But before we get into OKRs, before we get into books, let's talk about the virus. Because it is 2021 and most of us have been locked up inside our homes, not going very many places for over the last year. So let's talk about the virus. The Agile virus. The Agile virus was first identified in 2001. There's reason to believe it was circulating far earlier, but what's become apparent in the last 20 years is Agile spreads through digital technology use. It's the domains which use a lot of digital technology. So primarily software engineers to start off with. As other fields like marketing and other places, adopt more and more digital technology, we find the Agile virus spreads out there too. Agile is the set of processes, is the way of working, is the methods of working, if you like, of get you the biggest benefit from your digital technologies. If you adopt digital technology and you keep on working in non-agile fashions, you aren't going to maximize the benefit from digital technology. So as digital technology spreads, Agile spreads. And like any virus, Agile mutates. And this means it mutates for the better and it mutates for the worse. So, for example, you hold retrospectives. Within a retrospective, you're allowed to change the form of Agile you do. You're allowed to modify the DNA of Agile in ways to make it better and more applicable for your team and your environment. But that also means you're allowed to take bits away. You're allowed to change it. You're allowed to mandate that thou shalt spend a whole iteration writing requirements documents, and another iteration writing a design document, and another iteration coding, and another iteration. You can damage Agile in all sorts of ways. You're allowed to, because the virus mutates. So you can make it better, you can make it worse. What's become apparent in recent times is there's two distinct strains of the virus, or perhaps at least two distinct strains. One, I started calling Mild Agile, but I now call Corporate Agile. And this is a weakened form of the virus. It's unlikely to kill you, but it's also unlikely to deliver all the benefits and expectations that you may have. This is the form of virus that leads some people to talk about fake Agile, where teams do a morning stand-up meeting and they call it Agile, nothing else changes. But there's reasons why corporations prefer this type of Agile. Problem is, it doesn't give us the grand, spectacular, high-performing teams that we want. The other version of the virus, the other one is quite common, what we call radical Agile. And although I say common, it's not really that common. Radical Agile is a version of Agile which holds out the promise of high-performing teams, of continuous delivery where you're delivering hundreds of times a day. Radical Agile is teams that are rapidly learning, rapidly improving. Radical Agile is where most of the new ideas come from, if I'm being honest. We've got these two strains of Agile. And Corporate Agile is the one you tend to find in the corporate environment. Radical Agile is a little bit rarer than that. So why does Corporate Agile come about? Well, I think we have to look at the reproduction mechanism of Agile, of viruses. I think you're all aware now that you have an R value, the replication value. And what happens in corporations is corporations aim for a very high R value. They aim to have Agile rolled out across many, many teams. And this leads to a cookie-cutter approach, where all the teams are expected to work in a similar fashion. They're given their ceremonies, they're given their instructions. They may not even be expected to learn. There may be a center of excellence at the center which does all the learning and all the teaching. As a result, the effectiveness, which we might call E for effectiveness, if we've got R for reproduction, E for effectiveness is left lagging. So we've got all these teams that are doing some version of Agile. They've got all the ceremonies in place. They're going through the motions, but it's not that really radical, high-performing type of Agile that we've been hoping for. However, what you should note is this type of Agile, oops, that's the thing missing from that slide. This type of Agile is still better than what went before. Corporations that adopt this weakened form of Agile, it's still better than the processes they were following before. Even the most basic Agile techniques, approaches can sometimes make a big difference. It just doesn't give us quite what we wanted. So into this mix comes OKRs. And as I said at the beginning, some people interpret OKRs as return of command and control. I don't see it that way. For a start, OKRs offer an alternative to the project model. They offer an approach which is autonomy enhancing. The thing about the project model is we kind of defined so much up front. Teams had left with very little autonomy. OKRs offers a way of putting the team in an environment where they can have autonomy, and the OKRs communicate to the outside world what the team are doing, what the team are trying to do. So I sometimes think OKRs are an alternative model. So if you're familiar with my work on no projects or continuous digital, you'll recognize this. If you're into value streams and SAFe, and maybe that's why SAFe's now got OKRs, you'll recognize this. Or people say products over projects or teams over projects, or just the plain old Spotify model. These are all project-less models. And OKRs are putting something else on the table, which may be combined with these models or may be separate. And saying, OKRs are what the team are doing. Forget about your projects, forget about your timelines and all that. Think OKRs. Another good thing about OKRs is OKRs are established. They come out of Intel like 40, 50 years ago. Google uses them, and if Google Intel use them, your CEO is probably going to like them. Bono and Bill Gates use them. If Bono and Bill Gates use them, they must be good. And consultancies like them. Consultancies recommend them to their clients. So OKRs are management friendly. Unlike Agile, which spent 10 or 20 years trying to be management friendly, and when it became management friendly, it alienated a lot of developers. OKRs are management friendly out of the box. And they fill a need that we're missing in Agile. They fit well with Agile. They're iterative. You can think of them as test-driven. They support independent units, devolved authority, enhancing autonomy I mentioned. And they're very outcome-orientated. It's about what are they going to bring out, not which list of features, not how many velocity points, but what outcome, what difference are they going to make to the world? And failure is an option with OKRs. In fact, if you're hitting 100% of your OKRs, there's every chance that you're really not using them properly, because OKRs expect some failure. They expect you to push the envelope, have aspiration to try for better, and they are friendly of that failure. So there's a lot going for OKRs, and they fit with Agile. So let's look at how they work out here. So to start with enhancing team autonomy, think of it like this. We have our team, and the OKRs allow a team to draw a box around themselves and say to their stakeholders, their customers, the teams that work with them, this is what we're planning to do for this quarter. This is what you can expect from us. So teams can define their own space, and having defined their own space, teams can organize within that space as they like. It is the outcome that is important. How you get there doesn't matter. So teams decide what they want the outcome to be, they communicate that out, and then they organize themselves. They've created their own space. So I think of it a bit like an API. The team is creating an API and saying to the rest of the organization and people who relate to that team, this is what you can expect from us. This is what we're doing. This is how to hold us to account at the end of the quarter. So by doing that, you made space for the team to be autonomous. I sometimes go as far as to think of this as test-first management. The team, in specifying the OKRs, the outcomes and key results, are saying to their stakeholders and customers and everyone else, this is what you will expect from us. These are the tests we aim to meet by the end of the quarter. Yes? So it's a bit like test-driven development. Pull the tests to the front, think about what you want the outcome to be, specify it as tests. So OKRs are a descendant of a thing called management by objective. Management by objective was popular in the 60s and 70s. And it's fallen out of fashion largely because it doesn't work. But in management by objective, it starts off with somebody at the top of the organization, a CEO, the board, the planning team, whoever, and they decide what the objective is going to be. And they inform the ranks below them of what is expected of them. And they pass these down. And the middle managers below them then pass them down to people below them. So you get this cascading effect. This is management by objective. And actually, I'm sorry to say that a lot of people look at OKRs and they say, oh, these OKR things, they look a lot like management by objective. In management by objective, we filter down, we cascade down our objectives. Therefore, OKRs are just management by objective with some extra bits added. So I've taken to calling this cascading OKRs or COKRs. If you don't like this, you may already spotted the fatal flaw here. This is not Agile. If you have one or a few people at the top of an organization passing instructions down to those further down, it doesn't fit with Agile. It's disempowering for the teams. It's elevating decision-making higher up the organization, so you get a round trip delay as decisions get made. You're also going against the Agile principle that the people doing the work who are in close contact with customers know best what is needed. So used as cascading OKRs, used in a management by objective fashion, this doesn't work. This is not the OKRs I want you to be using. The way I see it is what I call white space OKRs, or you might think of it as bottom-up OKRs. We still have our leadership at the top of the organization, and the leadership are responsible for defining the destination. They talk about the mission of the organization. They talk about the purpose of the organization. They talk about the big, hairy, audacious goals, however you want to phrase it. They're talking about where we want to go, what we want to do. But they leave out the detail. They consciously leave white space. They constantly don't set out how to do this, which on your first look, you think, well, that's irresponsible. Shouldn't they define this? But the fact is that they can't. They're at the top of the organization. They don't know best. They can spell out a destination. They can paint a picture, but they leave white space. And that allows the teams to look at this destination and allows the teams to say, you know what? We can help towards this destination. We can build a bit of the road. We can build some of the movement. We can bring our customers along, because on the whole, in an agile environment, you have standing teams. Yes, teams come and go, but on the whole, teams support products or services, and they exist. So our senior levels set out where we want to go, and the teams, and they say to the teams, how can you help? The teams in the organization, this is where we want to go. How can you help? And the teams come back and the teams say, these are objectives. And the teams feed these up the organization. So instead of objectives being cascaded down the organization, the destination is outlined and the teams respond by saying, this is how we can help. This is what you can expect from us. Now, it's very good to talk about top down and bottom up. It's very simple, and it's the way we normally draw organizational charts, but it's more complicated than that. I prefer to think of organizations more like our solar system. At the center of the solar system is the sun, which in an organization is the top leaders, is the senior team, is the CEO, the CFO, all those people. Everybody in the organization has a relationship with the CEO. They may not know each other, but they have a relationship. Everyone in the organization has a relationship with the senior team because the senior team are responsible for those big questions, resource allocation, strategy, and all of that. And some teams, some people will be quite close in. They'll be like Mercury or Venus, and they'll be interacting a lot with the senior team. Other teams will be further out in our solar system. They'll be like Jupiter or even Neptune. You know, they orbit a long way away. So while the sun, the senior team have some influence, they're far more autonomous because they're further away. And it's not a simple case of the leader telling the teams what to do or the teams telling the leader what to do. It's a cooperative exercise. The teams set out how they will work, and then everybody consults. So you show these to the people who are senior, and you say, this is what our team intend to do this quarter. And they can say, hey, that looks good. I have a suggestion for improvement, or I don't see how that fits in, or can you explain why you're doing this? And the team should be able to justify what they are suggesting, but they should also be listening for feedback. Another good agile principle, listening to feedback from the senior people. And teams are also talking to other teams. If a team needs another team to do something for them, they talk to that team. They ask them to schedule it in their OKRs. They consult with each other. It's a two-way feedback. Yes, these are all autonomous teams acting on their own. It's not just about senior people telling them what to do. It's not just about customers telling them what to do or the teams deciding what to do. It's consultative. So it's about cooperation and communication with multiple stakeholders. In fact, one way I think about it is, I expect different side. One way I think about it is like this. It's like raindrops falling on a puddle or like stones falling into a lake. We've got the ripples here are the messages, it's the information flowing out from that event that a raindrop has fallen. And these ripples all interact with each other. Sometimes they cancel each other out, sometimes they amplify each other, and sometimes it just leads to confusion. So we have here our CEO, and our CEO is sending out ripples. I want to go here. I would like the teams to do this sort of thing. These are our objectives. The CEO is sending those messages out. We've also got your competitors. because your competitors don't pay any attention to your CEO. They launch competitor products. They interfere with you. They try and get in the way. And they are sending out messages as well. And then you've got your customers, actual customers, or at least users. They are sending out messages. And your team, particularly through your product owner, needs to be looking at all these sources of information to work out what is the right thing to do next. And your team has some asks. Maybe you've got some technical liabilities you need to deal with. Maybe you need to build out part of the product in a particular area for future work. You've got things you want to do. And you know what? Other teams may be asking you to do things. You've got responsibilities for them too. So all these waves are going out. And when you're writing your OKRs, you're looking at all this information, all these requests, all these possibilities, and you're boiling it down to a few things which you can then communicate out. So organizations exist. They have a purpose, hopefully to benefit society. Yes, we need to make money. We need to make profit, but that's like a hygiene factor. We're here to benefit a greater society. And organizations have missions. Some organizations have one mission. The mission is the purpose. Others, think of a drug company. Drug companies there to improve the health of people. And each one of their products is a little mission in a different way. Some companies have multiple missions. And your team comes along and your team sets OKRs every quarter. Purpose is largely invariant. The purpose is here this year, next year, in 10 years' time. Missions may come or go, but they hang around for a while. OKRs, on the other hand, are reset every quarter. Every quarter, your team sit down and say, how can this team advance this mission, deliver on the purpose? How can we move things forward? And here, I quite like you to take the Jeff Bezos approach of day one, where you imagine it's day one. The stuff you've done before, it isn't important. You may have partially done work. If it's not finished, it's not worth it. Think about where you are today. How can you best benefit? How can you produce the best outcome? And I hope this will allow you to supercharge prioritization. Think about a typical team. There's our team. Where does your work come from? Okay, Scrum tells us that work comes from the backlog. That's it, isn't it? End of story. Except some of you have support desks who filter work in as well. And whatever your best laid plans for the backlog this sprint, the support desk calls up and says, can you just, maybe you're a DevOps team. Maybe you support live running. Maybe you have to upgrade Linux servers. This gets in the way. Maybe you have sales teams who go and sell stuff or demand you go on sales calls or whatever. This is another competing demand for your time. Or even customers. Maybe customers come to you directly. And some of your team have history. Some of your team have worked on other things with this company before, and they periodically get pulled off to fix something they wrote 2 years ago. So work comes from all these places and more. And sometimes organizations just add OKRs. So amongst the backlog and the sales team and the customers and everything else, they say, oh, and by the way, we'd like to do these OKRs as well. So unless they come with 8 hours of extra hour, unless OKRs come with an extra 8 hours in a day, this is not going to work. This is just increasing work in progress. This is confusing your prioritization. So although I've heard of organizations trying to layer OKRs on top of everything that's already there, we have to take something away. And for me, we make OKRs everything. For me, every 3 months we stop and we think strategically. What are we going to do? What is the outcome? What's our objective? How are we going to measure this? And you write your OKRs. And everything else is secondary to the OKRs. If your team has to answer support desk calls, then we find some way of writing that into the OKRs. It's not big, it's not shiny, it doesn't get a lot of fuss, but we need to acknowledge it. Otherwise, when people look at our OKRs, they won't realize the extra work teams are doing. The same with DevOps, same with sales, customers, whatever it is. These need to be put in perspective with OKRs. And yes, I know this is difficult because there's lots of sources of work, there's lots of work to do. But with OKRs, we're thinking strategically. We are saying for the next 3 months, what are our strategic priorities going to be? And we want to try and stay the course with our OKRs. That means we want OKRs to be a reason to say to people, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm sorry, we have to leave that. It doesn't support our OKRs. That doesn't mean you don't put out fires. Of course, if a fire breaks out and it's not in your OKRs and you need to go and put the fire out, you damn well put the fire out. But let me just say, if all you ever do is put out fires, then all you will ever be is a firefighter. Yeah. For some teams, that is exactly right. And your OKRs should be about putting out fires as fast as possible. For other teams, you're going to say, look, strategically, we're trying to do something. Fires get in the way. We need to service them. We need to acknowledge that in our OKRs. But we've got things which sometimes are going to cause us to say, no, we're going to let that fire burn. So make everything about OKRs. In fact, don't get out of bed in the morning if it's not in your OKRs. This is how important it is. We make everything subservient. In particular, that raises the question of the backlog. Okay. The backlog may contradict your OKRs, may pull you in a different priority. It may mean that when you walk into your planning meeting, you're scratching your head saying, do we do the top item in the backlog or do we do an OKR? Basically, there are two ways of working with backlogs and OKRs. Perhaps the most obvious way is to write your OKRs so they support doing things in your backlog. So every 3 months, you look at your backlog, you group it in some way, and then you then write OKRs, which are about delivering things in the backlog. You can do that. I know teams have done it. It's less than satisfactory, and I think deprives you a lot of your strategic thinking. So the other alternative, and my advice, is throw your product backlog away. Make OKRs everything. Every 3 months, you stop and you think strategically. You set your OKRs. You ignore the backlog. The stuff in the backlog, and let's face it, these days backlogs are bottomless pits. That's why we have an electronic tracking system, so there's no, you can put as many as you want. Backlogs are just lots and lots of trees. You can't see the wood for the trees, and nobody ever bends down their backlog. That like chart they're doing Scrum is a crime. Nobody ever bends down the backlog. It just gets bigger. So when it comes to OKRs, throw away your backlog. If you can't actually throw it away, just ignore it. Set your OKRs for the quarter. Think strategically, think big, think outcomes. When you walk into your sprint planning meeting or your replenishment meeting, whatever you call it, look at your OKRs and let your OKRs drive your work. Let the OKRs be a story generator. So you look at your OKRs, you say, these are our priorities right now. What do we need to do to move forward on them? If you need to, write out a story. Now, if you remember there's a story in the backlog already and you haven't actually thrown it away, yes, you can go and rummage in the backlog and find the story and schedule it and do it. But just because a story is in the backlog doesn't mean it's going to get done if it doesn't help you with an OKR. And to be honest, if you haven't got a story in the backlog and you need a story, the quickest thing to do is to write it out. So don't be beholden to your backlog. Think of your OKRs as a story generator, a strategic story generator. Every time you need to think about what do we do next, you come back to your OKRs, you look at what needs doing, you look at how you can advance them, and then you write out one or more stories to deliver those things. I think this advice on the backlog is perhaps the most controversial thing I say in the book or in this presentation. But I think if you think it through, it makes sense. I know I worked with a coach a couple of years ago, and she took the first approach and she reverse engineered OKRs to fit the backlog. And the team I was working with, we wrote OKRs and we made the backlog secondary. At the end of the quarter, when we exchanged notes, she decided she was going to work on the OKRs first. We're going to put the OKRs to the fore. So make OKRs everything. And that means we can end the tyranny of the backlog. I'm fed up of seeing teams who are slaves to the backlog. It's all about how many stories or how many velocity points can we do. And we lose track of actually delivering meaningful outcomes. We lose track of our purpose. We want to go back to why our companies exist, why our products exist, what our missions are, how we are seeking to enhance the life of our customers, of our users, of our stakeholders. What is we really trying to do here? Because you know what? Most customers are not after a 50% reduction in the size of the backlog. Most customers don't pay for user stories. They pay for outcomes. That's what we want. And we've lost this. In corporate agile, the backlog has become tyrannical and developers are slaves to it. So let's put the purpose back in. And I think OKRs allow us to do this. Every 3 months, we think big. Then for 12 weeks, we think narrow and we execute. And then we repeat. So think strategically. You know, for a few days each quarter, step back, think strategically. What do we want to do? What outcomes we want? Not features. Strategically, big things, meaningful things that'll move you forward. At the end of the day, please don't count your OKRs and say, oh, we got 75% done, therefore it's a success. Step back, look at the outcome you created. Your OKRs at the beginning of a quarter are a hypothesis over what might benefit the world. At the end of the quarter, you want, have we made society a better place? Oh, I got a message saying internet connection is unstable. Hopefully I'll hold up for a couple more minutes. So success is not hitting 100% of your OKRs. I know some people think that's important. Some people think hitting 70% of your OKRs is important because that's what Google do. You know, I just tell you, if you hit 70% of your OKRs quarter after quarter after quarter, I'm suspicious. I think you're just playing a more sophisticated games than the people who hit 100% every quarter. When it comes to success, we need to move away from our numerical targets and we need to think more broadly again, and we need to think about the benefit we are creating. So success is the outcome. Success is perhaps making more profit, perhaps reducing costs, perhaps learning something, perhaps exploring a new technique, perhaps creating a product for a new segment. You know, look at the outcomes. Put all this together. Look at OKRs, and I no longer see command and control and management reinvented. I see an enabler for agile teams, a way of teams being able to communicate to the rest of the organization and to stakeholders and senior managers what they're doing. And I think teams should be writing their own OKRs. And this fits in completely with agile. If you do it right, of course, you can use them for evil as well, but please don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Allan, for that amazing talk. Oh, wait, I see myself twice. Hopefully detecting will fix this. Anyway, thank you so much for this amazing talk. And I believe we can jump into Q&A because there are a bunch of questions coming in. So yeah, let's get started with maybe the first one. Comes from Anonymous. If the teams are the planets, what are the asteroids in your model?
Maybe asteroids are those one-man teams which kind of veer around randomly and cause chaos and occasionally smash into things. I hadn't thought about that one.
For me, it's a great answer. So thank you very much. Next question also comes from Anonymous. Which companies, in your opinion, are good examples of agile management?
I was talking about somebody with this earlier on, and the problem with almost any case study you hear about is they have the rough edges knocked off, and you don't hear about the difficult bits. So I've heard great things about a couple of banks, and I talk to people there and I'm told it's not quite like that. And I've heard great things about Google, and I've talked to people at Google and they say, well, it didn't quite work out like that. I think developers and managers are destined to always be in a state of tension. I think it's one of those tensions that perhaps is inevitable and one we can never resolve. We can just find ways of making it a productive tension, because we do want the different stakeholders represented in our conversation. And developers and engineers tend to empathize with the code and they stand up for what's right technically. And managers' priorities are elsewhere, with customers, with shareholders, with other stakeholders. And it's a lot to ask any one person to hold all of that in their mind. So I think it's an inevitable tension.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. The next question comes from Gabor. How big is an ideal OKR in terms of focus? Annual, quarterly, other time frame? Or do you set OKRs by/without validating required effort and dependencies?
Oh, that's a lot of questions.
It's a mouthful.
Let's see if I can cover all the points there. So everybody I've ever heard of runs OKRs on quarters. Now, I think you could vary that. I think you probably get away with every half year. I'd rather not do it yearly. I'm happy to roll objectives over from one quarter to another quarter, but I'd want to change the key results. I can see a case for the first few times you run OKRs, running them on 6-week cycles to practice. But I think generally they're quarterly. That was the first part of the question, wasn't it? Scope, my rule of thumb is 3 objectives, each with 3 key results. And if we break that down, if you're running OKRs quarterly, that's 13 weeks in a quarter. Let's assume 1 week is taken up by closing out, reviewing, retrospecting, resetting OKRs. 12 weeks in a quarter, that leaves 6 sprints. So if you've got 3 objectives with 3 key results, that's 9. That's about 1 each week to achieve. If, on the other hand, you bend my arm and you stretch and you get me to agree to 4 objectives, each with 4 key results, that's 16 weeks. So that's a bit less than 1 per week. So I think every 3 months, it's 3, maybe 4 objectives, with each one has 3, maybe 4 key results. That feels about right. Now, I know that's difficult, and I know of plenty of teams that end up with laundry baskets of OKRs. Part of the reason we use OKRs is to increase focus. You can't increase focus if you don't say what not to do. And so somebody I was speaking to this morning, we were talking about supplementing the OKR list with a list of not to do's, of the things the team has deliberately decided not to do. Now, that's hard. But if you're going to get focused, we want to have that conversation earlier. And there's a final bit to this question, which I can't remember right now.
Let me look it up for a second. Basically, yeah, do you set OKRs by/without validating required effort and dependencies?
Okay, I would rather you set OKRs without defining the effort. Now, I know that's probably going to be counterintuitive and people are going to be fearful of it. We could have a long debate about estimation. Let's leave that somewhere else. Part of the rationale behind OKRs is to set ambitious goals. If you define everything and you estimate everything, I believe that will lead you to setting less ambitious goals. And I would rather you ambitious. More importantly, if we are going to define in detail what we're going to do for the OKRs, and we're going to design and perhaps estimate, which you'd all need to do to get within that scope, you're going to have to do it before you set the OKRs, which means you're going to have to do it in the previous quarter. Doing it in the previous quarter means you're going to detract from the OKRs in the previous quarter. So you'll lose some capacity there. You're also going to limit your thinking when you get into the quarter. I would rather, in the most agile fashion, set your OKRs at the start of the quarter. And then once they're set, you say, right, how are we going to do it? What novel, interesting ways are we going to find to move forward on this, and not limit yourself too much with lots of pre-planning?
Thank you for that answer. Let's look at the next question. It's also from Gabor, I think. The question is, who owns OKRs? What if an OKR is not about capacity, but example, quality of service? top-down, bottom-up, architecture-led, etc. So I think the first question is, who owns these OKRs?
I think OKRs are a common good. They should be written by the team, so that the product owner will lead on what the team might do, because that's the product owner's job, to think about what customers and stakeholders want. Like, they have specialist skills around that. It doesn't mean coders and testers' views are irrelevant. It just means that most days of the sprint, the product owner is talking to customers and getting out there and talking to others, and coders are coding and testers are testing. So product owners should lead. And you should, as a team, be able to stand in front of your executive and justify your OKRs and be proud of them and be able to say to them, this is how what we are doing will build towards your goals. They are not owned by the executives because they belong to the team, but they are not set by the team in isolation. They are proposed by the team and they take feedback from the execs. So the ownership model, if you force me, then it's the team who owns them, but really the team are setting them to benefit their customers and their stakeholders, and the execs are among them.
That makes sense. Thank you. Ignio asks, isn't the backlog prioritized with the same purpose as the OKR? I mean, to pick up the most and work on the most important output to the customer. So I guess if you are working with a prioritized backlog, isn't that already an indicator of an OKR?
If you're fortunate enough to have a prioritized backlog, yes, you could do it that way. Over the course of 3 months, I would expect your priorities to change a bit. Yeah, prioritizing the backlog should itself be a strategic activity, and that's another reason for not using estimation in it. So it can be, the two can be perfectly aligned, but that itself can be a lot of effort. And if all we ever do to our processes is add more techniques and ideas, we end up with unwieldy approaches.
Oops, Allan froze for a second. Hopefully we will stabilize.
I don't that.
Okay, you're back, Allan. Welcome.
Oh, hi, yeah. Where were we? Backlog. Yeah. So if your backlog is working and it's working perfectly well and everyone's happy, then please don't do OKRs. You're in a sweet spot. Don't add OKRs just because they seem like a good idea. If, on the other hand, there's something missing, please try OKRs. Feel free to try them with a backlog. I will.
Seems like the London internet is also not very kind to us today. You're back again. Allan, hi. It's you know, it's Zoom is getting tired of us, maybe.
I think we've done pretty well to get through the bulk of the presentation. So
yeah.
Sorry, everyone. My email address should be in the chat window and it's there on screen. If you don't get your question answered, or I'm just gobbledy to you, just drop me an email.
All right. Thank you for that offer. Your video is frozen, but I think we can hear you. So if you want to, we can try to answer a couple of more questions. Oh, and your video is back as well.
Yeah. Stop and start it.
All right, perfect. That's the way it goes. Okay, let's try to answer one more question and then maybe we can close the session. And yeah, as Allan said, I think we posted his email address and his LinkedIn in the chat as well. So he graciously offered that you can reach out to him outside of this conference as well. Thank you so much for that, Allan. Okay, so let's do this one last question from Santosh. Company season to pass OKRs from top to bottom. How do we change?
I think I only got the end of that question. How do we change?
Okay, let's do it again. Company season to pass OKRs from top to bottom. How do we change?
You can't change anyone else. You can only change yourself. So I think you have to step forward You have to stop waiting for other people to do it. You step forward and say to your team, what OKRs would we write? You know, given that the senior team have set out some goals, some objectives, how would your team respond to that? And maybe, even if they aren't expecting you to produce some OKRs, they'll listen when you show them. Maybe the OKRs you produce aren't different to the ones they give you. Maybe it's a starter for a conversation. You can say to them, look, you pass some OKRs down to us, you pass me instructions. This team thinks they would rather do this. Can we talk about this? Can we talk about what's going on here? Because things are not going to change if you wait for other people to change it. You know, as Andy Warhol says, time changes everything, but you have to change it yourself. You know, you have to get on the front foot, and you need to go and talk to people who are passing you these things and say, look, there's another way of doing this. Can we talk about this? Can we find a way that may work better? And I hope those people are open to hearing from you. I think you might be surprised that they are more open than most engineers expect. But another question that comes up is, how do we start with OKRs? And I think, again, you could just rally your team, get your team interested in this, show them this recording, buy them a copy of the book, get your team interested in it, then try and sit down and just blue sky, think, what would you write? And try it. And then perhaps just go to the next level up in your organization and say, hey, my team want to experiment with this. Can you buy us 3 months of runway to try this? Can you run with it? You know, a lot of agile practices, you can just start doing yourself. There's no law against you and your friends having a stand-up meeting. There's no law against writing a test first. You know, with OKRs, it's slightly different, because although you can try some stuff, you do need some people with some seniority, some authority to lend you their support and say, okay, we're going to carve out some space for you to run with this for a few weeks.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for the talk, and thank you so